Frankly, I'm broken. My heart can't be mended, befriended or woken. An emptiness consumes me. In sorrow I'm soaked. My words can't be heard as I'm strangled and choked. As tears stripe each cheek with a trail of sadness, my soul is stained black with the screams, with the madness.
Ricky, how are you, brother?
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Yes, I'm good. I always, the technology screws me up, mate. Like, are we recording?
Yeah, you and me both, mate. Before we started this earlier, I had my laptop out. I had a camera set up. I had a mic mounted on that. I had a podcast mic ready. I've got wires everywhere. And I couldn't get any of it to work, and so now I'm just on my mobile.
Yes. I tell everyone for Zoom, use your phone. The thing is with these phones these days, Ricky, the technology in that is way more advanced than any laptop. You know, laptop, you're getting like 720p. These things are like 4K if you want them.
That's it.
And friends at home, it's right, said Fred.
We are too sexy for our shirts.
Yes, I've had those boys on the podcast. They're an absolutely lovely couple of gentlemen.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, but we're here. I just played a little bit of your poem, Grenfell. I mean, you've been through the mill. I think you're a bit like me. You had some childhood stuff. Then you had the kind of service stuff. I was in the Marines, you were in the fire service. And then after we left, it all come to a head. Is that a good synopsis?
Yeah, I'd say so. For me, it all came to a head whilst I was still in service. Pretty soon after the Grenfell Tower fire, I think that was, as an incident in itself, obviously it's a monumental incident. It's a huge loss of life, and it was difficult to process. I think for anybody that would be difficult to process, but I also think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was, 13 years into my service with the LFB. And so obviously I'd seen a lot of different incidents. And all the while you're not being overtly affected, you assume you're unaffected completely. And I don't think that's the case. You know, I think you are affected. It builds up and your head's just above the waterline. And then something big happens and it's like someone's dumped something heavy on top and suddenly you sink into the bottom of the ocean. And that's how it was for me. And really the last 6 years of my service were a constant battle of, for myself, for my own mental health, whilst also trying to repair and limit the damages that I caused around me. Damaged relationships with my son, a split with his mum, moving home. A battle ensued with my employer because I wanted to be doing things like this and talking about mental health, and they didn't want me to. So I was fighting my employer for my job for a few years. And in the end, you just get, I think I woke up one day and just thought, what am I doing this for? Why am I going in every day when there is more I can be doing with myself and my life? There is happiness out there to find. And I had lost sight of that. And I think when things no longer make you happy, you have to adjust them so that you can find happiness in them, or you have to move on and find new things.
It's a great point, mate. Yeah, I wonder, I mean, you see this in the services, and, the military's great for a while. You certainly get to do some incredible experiences that you wouldn't get to do if you hadn't joined. But once you sort of done them, I don't know. I felt that there was quite a few of us that were like, "Oh, this is a bit shit now." This is like
we've been cold and wet for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking anyone that wants a career and thoroughly enjoys it. Great, I'm fully envious of you, but I found there was quite a few people, especially when you get into I was going to say a REMF unit, rear echelon. You know, you're not in a commando unit. You're doing some kind of 9 to 5 or usually a sort of guard duty based routine, and you stood on a gate for 4 hours on, 4 hours off on your Sunday. You're going to be doing it again on Tuesday and then again on Thursday, and you're chatting with some very well-meaning civilian security guard, and he's telling you how this Saturday he's going to go up to Trago Mills and he's going to buy some new floor carpets for his Sierra. And it's great. I sound like a prick, but I just mean you stood there going,
I get it.
Is this my life now? There's got to be more. And like I say, that was just my experience, but there were many people like me. And whenever we discussed moving on, you got this kind of almost like scripted, indoctrinated statement that, well, there's nothing out there. There's nothing. And to me, even that alone was a red flag. And I'll hold my hand up and say I would have hung in there for the security of the job, that wage, the sickness and in health kind of stuff. But I was quite lucky. I started a business and it really happened to take off. So I had a reason to go, oh, this is my, my golden opportunity. Little did I know it was the start of my mental health experience. But
I've always, just to build on your point, and again, I'm exactly the same as you. I would never tell anyone not to join the fire service. I had some incredible years. I met some incredible people. I did some incredible things. And I've had an amazing opportunity to directly help people from all over the world countless times. That is an experience I wouldn't trade for anything at all. However, when it starts to go wrong, I would liken it, and this again sounds harsh, but I would liken it to an abusive relationship. Because this is my perspective. What the employer says is, you've got no qualifications or skills that are applicable to the outside world because they're all in-house qualifications. So yes, you can climb on ropes, but it's not an external qualification. You can pilot boats on the Thames, but they're not external qualifications, and so on and so forth. And so you're convinced that there's nothing out there for you, and that without your employer, you are effectively nothing. So you have to stay with them. And they give you just enough. You have just enough good days for you to go, oh, well, I know last week was awful, but it's okay. They didn't mean it. This week has been a really good week. Look how great it is. And you start to convince yourself of the good times and ignore the bad times more and more and more. And the problem with that for me was that it then allowed them to treat me worse and worse, and I would excuse it more and more and more, much like being in an abusive relationship. And it's only when I got out and I looked back, particularly at the last few years of my career, and I thought, why did I stay so long? When all of that was going wrong, when I felt so unsupported, when so much was falling apart, why did I stay? And it was because I was scared of the alternative, which was to not have them.
Yes, that was exactly my point I was making. And this isn't, like I say, this is not to belittle anyone. It's just to highlight the point, how easily kind of like indoctrinated we are as a society, that we do these jobs that we don't even want to get up in the morning for. I'm not saying yours or mine. I'm talking generally now.
In general, yeah.
And it's not until
I think that's why they use the word duty a lot as well. Or you're, as a police officer or a firefighter, you're on duty. As a member of the military, it's your duty to serve your king and country. And to a point that is right, in terms of you've chosen that career path and now you have obligations. But I feel the word duty is used almost to sort of say to you, you have no choice in this. This is what you have to do. This is what you owe your country, one way, or your city, or one way or another. And that's where I think the toxicity starts to creep in slightly, because I was on a week's notice, 18 and a half years. I walked into my fire station and I resigned on a week's notice. So to turn around and convince me that it's my duty to serve the city and yet have such an impersonal and easy out, that they don't correlate for me.
Yeah, and Ricky, I want to come on and talk about Who Dares Wins. A couple of my mates have hosted that show, and also obviously Grenfell, which has been a huge factor in your life, and that was a horrendous disaster. And I'm guessing the public probably don't know the full story there.
I think a lot of it was exposed in the inquiry, but it depends, as always, it depends how much people read, because the inquiry findings are due to come out shortly, I believe. And it is, it's going to be thousands of pages of documents. So I doubt very much anyone could or would want to dedicate every single day of their life watching the inquiry, listening to the evidence. If they did, they'd be heartbroken, because it was catastrophic. The failings of the building, the failings of people involved in the construction of the building, it was just horrific.
Yes. Let's come on and talk about that. But one thing I'm always keen to get across to people, we're a very indoctrinated society. When you say PTSD, everyone thinks you've got to be in a frontline service to experience that. And they don't realize that, no, the adult stuff you can get over because you're an adult. You can justify it, you can rationalize it, you can reflect, you can, change your thinking. It's the childhood stuff that is the most pertinent, and that probably so many people have experienced and don't even realize it. I mean, it might be something as simple as your parents divorced. And you're like, oh, lots of people do. But no, that in itself can be highly traumatizing for a kid. So, I just wondered if we could touch on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I use an analogy when I deliver talks to people about trauma, because, like, you're quite right, a lot of people do think PTSD is something associated. Primarily, I feel people always assume you've served in the military. If you say you had PTSD, they go, oh, where did you serve? They don't realize that a woman can get PTSD from childbirth, or a child can get PTSD from whatever it is. Like you said, it could be a divorce. And so the analogy I use, which is used as a thought-provoking question, really, rather than an answer or a solution, which is if you imagine two 5-year-old boys leading parallel lives, and on their 5th birthday, they get given a bunny rabbit each. Up until then, their lives are, for all intents and purposes, perfect. Now you've got boy A and boy B. Now boy A's life continues on that stream. It's brilliant. Everything's great. Nothing goes wrong. He reaches his 11th birthday. Now boy B, his life goes differently. His father's killed in a car accident. His mum becomes an alcoholic, can't take care of him anymore. So he gets put into care, gets to take his rabbit with him. Whilst he's in care, he's bullied by older kids, so on and so forth. He reaches his 11th birthday. On their 11th birthday, both bunny rabbits die. Which child is more traumatized? The one who's had no trauma whatsoever, and so this is the worst day of that kid's life, or the kid who's had so much trauma to that point that, is this the straw that breaks the camel's back? Or is this, oh, well, it's just a rabbit, it's not as bad as all the other stuff that's happened? Is the kid that's had the perfect life up until that point and his rabbit dies going, well, do you know what? How lucky am I to have had all of the fortune that I've had, and only now something bad has happened to me? And it's a really interesting perspective. You can't call it which one goes which way. And that sums up the individuality of trauma and the individuality that goes with each person. How you react to a situation and how that situation, what emotions and mental response that situation brings out in you is unique, cannot be guessed at, and certainly shouldn't ever be judged.
Absolutely. So Grenfell, do you want to just sort of summarise it for our friends out there I mean, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Grenfell Tower fire, but how do we put that into words?
Well, in summary, it was a small fire that started in a tower block in Ladbroke Grove, one of the richest boroughs. In fact, I think it is the richest borough in London, and one of the richest towns in the UK. The tower block was deemed an eyesore by more affluent residents who campaigned to have cladding put up against the building so that it would look nicer when they looked out their windows. The cladding that was used was not fit for purpose, and so this small fire that started on the 4th floor from a 40 fridge freezer set light to, it was pushed up against the window, set light to the curtains, which in turn burnt on the outside of the building, set fire to the cladding. The cladding basically was, if you imagine a small rectangle of insulating material with a larger rectangle of aluminium ACM placed on top of it. And then the points of the aluminium meet, but the points of the insulating material do not. So you've got chimneys running up, above and below every single panel from the outside. So once they started to burn and had an extremely violent reaction to the fire, all of those hot fire gases moved up the outside of the building through these man-made chimneys and just set fire to more and more and more panels. Inside the building, when all of the remedial refurbishment works were done, compartments, if you imagine a 1960s tower block is basically a collection of solid concrete squares. They cannot be bypassed because it's solid concrete. If everything in that flat burnt out the fire and ran out of fuel, the fire would go out. However, because you've got fire burning on the outside, it could then jump from floor to floor and burn in from the outside. Also, in these compartments, when the refurbishment works were done, contractors had drilled through one compartment to the next to run gas lines and electrical cables and not used the correct intermittent fireproofing. So fire then spread through those gaps, breaching each compartment. None of this obviously was known to the fire service. On top of that, there were numerous flats that had requested new doors, front doors to be fitted from the council. The council didn't come back to most of those people, and living under council conditions, some of the people couldn't afford 400, 500, 600 pounds for a carpenter to come and fit a fire door. So they just got a cheap door from any of your high street retailers that sell them, get a normal door fitted, that gives you 20 minutes protection, give or take, instead of a fire door giving you 2 hours or more. And so when fire was in the landings and lobby areas, it also then burnt through the doors very quickly and ripped through the apartments. So you're fighting a fire that is traveling through the walls, up the outside of the building and through the communal areas. On top of that, the stairwells that are supposed, the stairwell, there's only one, that's protected, i.e. There are smoke vents on each floor that automatically open when the alarms go off to allow any smoke that's getting in there from the lobby areas to escape from that section. So that if you make it onto a stairwell, you're safe. You can breathe breathable air and you can get out the building. 24 floors at Grenfell. Every single smoke vent on every single floor failed through poor maintenance. So you just had an unsurvivable building, an unsurvivable situation. And to work in that environment was horrific. So I couldn't even begin to imagine how it must have felt to have been a resident in there that didn't survive in their final moments, but also the residents that did survive. How you even begin to put your life back together after something like that, it is beyond me. And I'm in touch with a fair few of the residents from the night through social media channels and different support stuff. And people are slowly piecing their lives together. But now it's coming up to the 7-year anniversary in a few days, and people are just starting to speak positively about their lives. They have lost almost a decade, as well as, in some cases, every member of their family apart from them.
And Ricky, are we right in thinking, was this the immigrant community? Was that a factor in this? That because the official death toll, was it around 70, or is that grossly
It
underestimated?
was, yeah, it was 72 people that were accounted for as deceased. In terms of the demographic of people that lived there, London's a multicultural city, so there was a wide-ranging demographic. Some were council, some owned their own flats, some were white, some were Italian. There was a large percentage that were Muslim. In terms of immigration status, I've got absolutely no idea. I'm sure that if there were a large amount that were Muslim, that they would be either first, second, or third generation immigrants. But what actually helped on the night and saved a lot of death, particularly from that community, was the fact that it was Ramadan. And so despite it being summer and lots of windows being open, which definitely helped with transfer of fire from compartment to compartment, it also meant that a lot of people were up eating and drinking in the hours of darkness before they went to sleep. So, and a lot of people also woke up in the early hours as well for I think they call it suhoor, which is the early meal that they'll get up for before sunrise so that they're not starving all day. So those things actually helped because a lot of people were up and were able to evacuate. God only knows how many people would have died if that had been a predominantly Christian bloc, potentially, maybe way more death.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if I thought there was an implication there that there could have been an awful lot more people in that building than was declared dead. For the
Right.
notion that, you know, choose me words carefully, haven't I? But, you know,
Illegal subletting and things like
yeah,
that.
you know, having
Over
like
occupancy.
20 of your mates sleeping on the floor, and I'm not that's not a judgment. That's kind of,
Yeah. The honest answer is well, if we look at it forensically, because I was there for some of the forensic element of the recovery of bodies. So everything was sieved. So every single piece of ash that came out of that building was put through a sieve, and any body components, fragments of bone, anything, were then tested and allocated to a person that had died. If there were any human remains that had been found that couldn't be accounted for, would the government turn around and say, we had allowed people to live in squalor, we can't account for these people, there are lots of unnamed deceased? I don't know if they would. It was already looking pretty bad for them. But to be honest with you, having been back to help the police DVI teams with body recovery 2 days after the fire, I witnessed the worst of what the fire did. And it was, I would say the figures were accurate based on what I saw.
so Ricky, let's talk about your story then. Where were you when you got the call?
We were on our first night shift at Battersea Fire Station, and the bells went down about quarter to 1 in the morning. We were on what we call make pumps 12. There were already 6 fire engines there. They were requesting another 6. So turnout times for the fire service is 60 seconds. So within 60 seconds, we're out of bed in our pants, dressed, down the pole, tear off the call slip, know where we're going, what incident we have on the fire engine, and driving out inside that 60 seconds. You, I'm sure, will understand rapid deployment better than most. So we were on our way there, knowing already that it was a fast developing fire. We then heard over the radio, this is now make pumps 20 fire, which meant even though the 6 that we're included in aren't there yet, there were another 8 being requested. So that tells us that this really is changing quickly, because that was within another 60 seconds. So within 2 minutes of us being mobilized, there are now more requirements. And then we heard another radio message come across. There's something called a fire survival guidance call, which in a nutshell means if you're trapped by the conditions of the fire, you'll phone the fire brigade. They will give you guidance that will keep you alive until you are rescued. Once you answer that call and you declare it an FSG, fire survival guidance call, that member of control staff will stay on the phone with that person until they are rescued or until that person is dead. The next radio message we got was there are 156 fire survival guidance calls in progress. Now,
I don't.
When you hear that, you already know people are going to die.
That's something for the person on the other end of the phone as well, isn't it?
Well, I always give the control staff a shout out because they're often overlooked. And can you imagine on that night being a member of control staff, hearing somebody's last moments on the phone, literally having to just do nothing. You've got no control. All you can do is put the phone down. It rings, you pick it up again, London Fire Brigade, what's your emergency? And it could be another person at Grenfell Tower, and you've got to go through it again. Or it could be some drunk idiot that's stuck in a lift somewhere in London that's shouting abuse down the phone at you. And you have to remain professional still.
It's beyond
that
words,
I
mate,
would
isn't it?
not have wanted to be there that night.
Yeah. God, I think we can only imagine how them phone calls ended. Just, jeez.
Horrific. Yeah.
And so, did you have to enter the building, Ricky?
Yeah, I went into the building 3 times on the night. The first time I went in, genuinely didn't think I was coming out again. Myself and my colleague Leon, we went up to the entry control point, and we were tasked with going to the 15th floor to rescue somebody that was on a fire survival guidance call. So obviously we already know if we don't rescue that person, they're probably going to die. So there's a lot of pressure instantly. We also knew that we only had standard duration breathing apparatus. So our oxygen tanks, or air tanks, I shouldn't call them oxygen, our air tanks weren't big enough, basically, in a nutshell, to get us there, perform the task and get out. So we know we don't have enough air. We were then told, take a length of rolled hose and see if you can get water on the 15th floor. So we know we've also got to go through 11 floors of the building that are fully engulfed in flames without enough air to get out, and not knowing if we're going to have any water until we get to the 15th floor so we can perform our task. Now, for anyone that doesn't realise, smoke is effectively floating petrol. It reacts the same way. If it's hot enough, it will spontaneously ignite. So we use a technique called gas cooling, which means if there's a room where the ceiling is covered in thick black smoke and it's hot enough, if you put a lighter into that smoke layer, it will ignite. Now, when you've got a room like that and a flame is introduced, what you get is a fire gas explosion. The temperature will go from anything between 500 degrees Celsius to in excess of 2000 degrees Celsius in a couple of seconds. And it's a violent explosive force that ruptures internal organs. It's unsurvivable, even as a firefighter, even in fire gear. So what we do is we use our hose as we work through the smoke layers, and we cool the gases down so they can't ignite to protect us. So we already know we don't have that opportunity, and we're in a building where fire is above us, around us, and below us. We may lose our path out. We may not have water to cool gas. We may run out of air. And we still have to, even if all of those things work out, gain entry to a property where somebody is going to be relying on us to get them out with none of the protection that we have. They don't have any fire gear or anything. So it would have been a case of grab the person and just drag them out and barrel your way out the building as quickly as possible. No regard for safety, no regard for health and safety stuff, policies, procedures, all the stuff that's drummed into you. You must do this, you must do this. If you don't do this, you'll die. All of those things out the window straight away. None of them apply. And then on top of that, we were told, take your length of rolled hose, take a 20 kilogram enforcer, your branch for the hose, both of our BA sets and all of our fire gear meant we were carrying around 50 kilos of additional weight each. And the temperature when we got to the 15th floor, after getting lost twice on the stairwell, we had to come off of the stairwell on 2 occasions, because another thing that was done in the refurbishment works was the emergency lighting was placed over the floor numbers. So we didn't know what floor we were on. So we had to come off of the floor onto a fire floor, off of the landing onto a fire floor, and then search around in heat and smoke, braille fashion, to try and find a door number so we could estimate what floor we were on, and then find our way back onto the lobby, the stairwell, and then make our way back up to the next lobby area that we were looking for. By the time we got to the 15th floor, we hadn't done a gauge check at this point to see how much air we'd used, but we were puffing, as you can imagine. The first thing I remembered getting to the 15th floor was an eerie silence. It was just, there was no fire sound. There was no more screaming and shouting. The comms on my radio set had failed. So we got no contact with the outside. And it was just deathly silent. And I realized at that point, we were probably the two firefighters that were highest up in the building, and suddenly felt very lonely. This obviously all happens in a split second. I then noticed my wrists were starting to burn and the back of my neck was starting to burn with the heat. And I thought, right, I need to see how hot it is up here. So I used the thermal imaging camera, another bit of equipment we had to take with us. And I scanned the lobby area. It gives you an infrared reading of what the heat is. And at floor level on the lobby area, with no direct fire, it was 550 degrees Celsius. So we were already cooking. And I literally mean cooking. I don't mean we were a bit warm. I mean, we could feel our skin burning inside our fire gear. So we needed water. Carrying the hose up the stairwell on the way up, the hose had spilled out. It's sort of, if you imagine a belt folded in half and then rolled up on the bight on the closed end, so the two open ends are out. That's how we roll hose. So the middle of the hose had spilled out like a walnut whip and just gone everywhere when we were sort of trying to make our way up, because of the amount of obstacles that were in your way, people coming in and out, other firefighters, hose everywhere. So we had tangled hose. So my first job was to kneel down on the floor and then start to try and untangle the hose blind, because it was zero visibility up at that height. My colleague Leon went off down the corridor to try and find the dry riser so we could get some water. He took the end of the hose with him, and I sat there, eyes closed, even though I couldn't see anything, just to try and heighten my other senses, and started passing the hose back through loop after loop on itself to try and untangle it. By some miracle, I managed to get the hose untangled. As I got the hose untangled, I connected the branch to the end of the hose, and then I heard this high-pitched whistle go off. And it starts low and slow, and then it kind of like a whistle of an old kettle, and then gets louder and louder and louder. And that was the whistle on my BA set telling me I'm running out of air. At that point, with not making much effort, you're probably going to use up your air inside 12 minutes. Obviously, with the amount of effort we'd have to make to get out, you can halve that easily. So I'm now on the 15th floor, burning, still don't have water, haven't even opened the door to the guy's flat, 550 degrees Celsius, and I've got 6 minutes before I'm stuck in a mask to my face. And at that point, obviously, you're always thinking about training. Your mind's racing, and you're trying to think, right, what's next? How do I mitigate this problem? How do I get over this? How do I change something? And I thought, it's fine. I can connect my auxiliary hose to Leon's BA set, and I can supplement his air. So we might have enough to get out. And as I thought that, I swear to God, I heard Leon's whistle go off down the corridor. And I thought, we're dead. We're not, there's no way. Even if there is a way back out the building at this point, which there probably isn't anymore, we've got 6 minutes. Leon made his way back. We charged the hose. Amazingly, we had water. I did some gas cooling. I took the temperature down by a couple of 100 degrees in the lobby area, so our skin stopped burning at least. And then we had a few seconds to make a decision. What are we doing? And it was a very quick decision. I'm always slightly ashamed to say, but we chose not to even open the door to that guy's apartment, because we just didn't, logically, we didn't see it as a survivable situation. The guy was probably already dead. And if he wasn't, he certainly wasn't going to survive the journey out, not through those conditions. And myself or Leon or both of us would have run out of air, traveling much, much more slowly. And we couldn't give him any eggs. We didn't have enough for ourselves. So we'd have gone through all of that and probably carried out a dead person at best. And the other factor you have to consider in that situation, and again, you'll be familiar with this, a hierarchy of rescue. If I get into trouble and I have to set off my emergency alarm on my BA set, the firefighters closest to me are going to abandon whatever it is they're doing, and they're going to come and try and save me, which means other people don't get rescued. So you have a multifaceted responsibility, a responsibility to your partner to not put them in trouble, to yourself, to your family, to the people you're trying to rescue, but also to the other firefighters that might have to risk their lives to come to you. And so we chose not to try and rescue the guy, and we literally ran out the building. And I mean ran, like one hand on the wall, one hand on the banister, throwing ourselves down flight after flight after flight of stairs. And we got out with seconds, and I mean literally mean seconds. But as I got the mask off of my face, I went to turn my air off and it stopped, like seconds. And that was the first time. And I remember looking at the building afterwards. I was on my knees outside, but utterly exhausted. We'd been in there about 40 minutes. And I looked up at the building and I just thought, it can't be the same building. It was just a giant fireball, the whole tower. And in that moment, you look at what can you do? Well, you need to square your kit away. You need to get yourself fixed up and ready, get some water on board. And then we rejoined the queue to go back in with a fresh set and a fresh cylinder, because that's all you can do in that situation. You go again. Did I want to go in again? No, I did not. I felt like I'd really ridden my luck the first time, but you do. And we did it again a third time. And, every firefighter, one of the most compelling images I saw of that night was a queue of firefighters waiting to go into the building. And those firefighters were not being kind to the people that were controlling how many people went in. We were harassing them. Get us in, let us go in. And they're doing their jobs well by limiting the amount of firefighters in, because if you flood a building with firefighters, you overrun resources and it's carnage. You can't monitor who's in there. People die. Firefighters die. And then, as I said, part of my role, specialist rescue, I went back 2 days later, which was the final nail in my mental health coffin, to be honest. Going back 2 days later to help the police with body recovery and seeing what at the time I perceived to be 72 failures staring them in the face. And the scenes were harrowing. I never really go into talking about those scenes because I don't think it's particularly respectful for any of the deceased families if they were to watch or listen. But that's one part of the job that I wish I hadn't done.
How do you leave an incident like that? I mean, what do you all go down the pub? Do you have a chat? Does everyone ignore it? Do you start making jokes, which is a service way of coping with grief?
It was the first incident I've ever attended where I cried before I left. It was the first incident I'd ever attended where it was silent on the truck on the way home. I'll say home. We left at 2 p.m. We went to Paddington Fire Station. We had a mass debrief for the crews that had left and been taken over by crews arriving. So we had a bit of a hot debrief, they called it. Is everyone all right? Is everyone fitting well? Anyone injured? We've got an emergency counsellor here to go and speak to. And we're like, I appreciate why they did what they did, but that is not the time to speak to a counsellor. Minutes after leaving the worst fire since World War II, that is not the time to speak. You haven't even begun to process what you've seen and what you've done and what's happened around you. And so by the time we went off duty, it was 4 p.m. We'd gone on duty at 8 p.m. the previous day. So it was 20 hours, a 20-hour shift. We went off duty for 4 hours and we were back on duty again at 8 p.m. that same day to do our last night shift.
What was the atmosphere like? What was the banter like then between the... Have you got any lasses on your crew?
We didn't at that point. We didn't at that point. But to be honest with you, the atmosphere was strange in that it was almost like the previous night hadn't happened. It was almost unanimously and without discussion, we all agreed it wouldn't be discussed. It just wasn't a topic. I think we were all internally still coming to terms with it and trying to process it. Some of us felt angry and gutted that we hadn't been able to achieve more while we were there. Some of us felt angry and gutted that we hadn't been able to go in as many times as we wanted to try and help. You know, there is nothing worse as a firefighter than being at an incident, desperate to take part in it and not being able to for one reason or another, or having been being tasked with a role that you don't see as pivotal. You know, like you're in charge of hose management outside the building. I don't want to do that. I want to go in. I want to rescue. I want to save someone's life. And so there was a multitude of things we were all working out internally. And so it was very normal the next night, very normal. It wasn't really somber. It wasn't particularly quiet, I wouldn't say, but it wasn't boisterous and banter and like it would usually be. You know, it was just a very calm, we're getting on with what we're getting on with, and we're all looking forward to having 4 days off. Although, you know, a day after going off duty, my pager went off, and, you know, I remember the feeling, my heart sank, and I knew I'd have to go back. And we were all asked, in fairness to the fire brigade, you don't have to go. But you know as well as I do, you do. You're never going to say no.
We didn't have that option in the military.
No, fair.
I remember when our lad got shot dead, we had a debrief. I remember the OC went, right, fellas, you know, we've had this incident. You've all reacted, you know, aggressively in a potentially threatening situation. Let's go back and do our jobs. And I'm sorry, I'm just chucking this out there for the sake of conversation's sake. That was it. I felt very, very proud that day to be a Royal Marine, I have to say, because I was 19 years old, and I'm like, let's go back out. But
yeah, and it was the same for us at Grenfell in that respect. You know, when there was a surplus of firefighters. There wasn't enough room in a tower for all the firefighters. So we were lucky in that we did have the option of not getting back in that queue. We could have found jobs outside, and there would have been plenty of staff still to go in and do the job that needed to be done. But instead of that, what you were surrounded by was men and women that were desperate to get back in there, that were fighting each other to get back in, you know, and it's the same thing. It makes you incredibly proud. It was an incredibly sad day, but I was incredibly proud of the London Fire Brigade and the firefighters that were my brothers and sisters at the time, to work alongside them. Leon Whitley particularly, he was just monumental. That first trip into the tower, I'd be dead without him. 100%, I'd be dead without him. You know, he's a lifelong friend, and he will be in my life forever. He saved me in there.
When you were making your way up, then were the people coming down?
Yeah, we're going up there. It was very difficult to see. As I said, the stairwell was compromised, so you're sort of working in quite thick smoke. But there were lots of people shouting. There were firefighters leaving and joining the stairwell from different floors. There were people pushing past, firefighters pushing past, people fighting to get up as well as down. It was just carnage on the stairwell. You know, you're talking a stairwell that's 1.5 meters wide, and 2 firefighters fills that. So if you've got firefighters going up single file and firefighters coming down single file, there's no room for casualties. You know, and that's before you've considered all of the hose and trip hazards. Floors are being flooded with water, so there was a cascade, like a waterfall of hot water coming down, landing on you, getting your fire gear nice and wet, so that when you get onto a fire floor, you instantly start to boil. You know, it was horrendous. The conditions were horrific. But everyone performed with excellence, you know, despite the loss of life and despite what people may have seen or heard in the media, some very toxic things. that were said pre-inquiry and during the inquiry. But from what I witnessed, and that's all I can ever speak on, the firefighters that worked that night were heroic. All of them.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. And, you know, let's give a shout out to our fire service, because when you need them, it's the worst scenario in your life, Ricky, isn't it? You know, it's the worst situation you can ever be in. You or your family or your loved ones are facing the ultimate, and these boys and girls come in selflessly, and thank God that we've got guys like you, you know.
So two things I always say about the fire service specifically, which is, when someone asks me what I enjoyed about the job, I said to them, I get to turn up to somebody's worst day of their life and be a wheel in making it better, as good as it can be. There will be people that wouldn't recognize me by face, but would recognize my voice, or vice versa. Would not have a clue what I sound like, but would see my face and know exactly who I was. You know, you're imprinted on people in those scenarios. And the other thing I say is, firefighters leave incidents, but incidents don't leave firefighters. And that was something I learned post Grenfell a while later. And in that same way, the people we go out to rescue imprint on us. You know, if I could draw, and I can't, I'm a stick man guy, but if I could, I would be able to draw in detail the faces of people that I have saved or lost whilst on the job. You know, they're ingrained on you.
Do you keep in contact with them, or is that like a sort of self-sustaining trauma thing?
The only people I have is some of the survivors from Grenfell. And that was more by default than anything. I think we needed them as much as they needed us. It was easier to be a united front. You know, it was easier to have support of people that were there fighting to save their loved ones. And it was easier for us to have the support of those that had lost loved ones and weren't blaming us. You know, it was a really important two-way street. And so there have been friendships formed and bonds formed through mutual loss. But in general, no. I remember once I went, and there's a very good reason. I went to an incident once there. It was a hanging. A guy had taken his own life. It was on Father's Day, and he'd hung himself out the bathroom window of his family home for his family to wake up and find him on Father's Day morning. And we were asked to go there and help the police with the body retrieval, so to cut the body down and, you know, do the best job we could. And obviously you go there and you're as dignified as you can be, and you allow the deceased to have the dignity they deserve. And I found it very, you know, I was a new dad, and I found it a bit close to home. You know, I don't know, it hit me harder than previous incidents had. And I was a little bit upset, but I went for a coffee with one of the guys that I worked with, and we were just sort of talking about the incident, you know, having a bit of a heart to heart, getting it all out there. And the son of the guy happens, bearing in mind we're on a different fire ground when this incident happened. He happened to have just come to the cafe, the same one we're sitting at the same time, round the corner from our fire station, after we've gone off duty. And so I'm sitting there drinking my coffee, and he's just looked at me, or both of us have just gone cold. Our faces have dropped. And then he put his hands up like this, looked at me and just mouthed, "Thank you," and then walked off. And honestly, I just went. I just absolutely went. And I thought, that is why you do not stay in touch with people. Not that I had, but that is a good enough reason. I don't need that in my life. You know, that's tug on the heartstrings stuff.
Ricky, do you think, because I talk about this a lot, I interact with people in these scenarios, I've done countless podcasts, and I think I'm very proud to say I think you're like the third or fourth firefighter we've had on the show. In fact, I've just I was just flashing my friend's book up, Stephen Charles, in case you were wondering whose book cover that is. Steve came on the show lovely bloke. We're friends to this day. We're all into spirituality now, which is kind of
No.
that's just another story again. But we have some lovely chats, me and Steve. But I can see in traumatized people. I got this thing, right? Yesterday doesn't exist. And I really mean it, and I do it quite clinically. I remember my friend drowned on our holiday, and we've been up to shenanigans, you could say, and it didn't end well. And I remember being stood there on a beach in Portugal with his dead body at my feet, and I thought, right, do I go down the line of, oh God, you know, fuck off? No. What would, I call him Lee in my book. What would Lee say? He'd say, Chris, fucking get a grip, man. Fuck off. Go and have a beer. And that was it. And that was it. Literally at that moment, I left it behind. It was no one's fault. It was a tragic accident. It was just a tragic accident. And boom, you know. I'm not a sociopath or anything. I did have about three, maybe a month or 2 months later, something triggered me. It was just a silly little thing in my kitchen, and I remembered Lee, and I cried my eyes out, man. You know, I just cried for England, and then went on and lived my life. You know, but I do think the problem in the trauma world is people kind of start wearing it as a badge of honor, and it's their thing. And hey, I'm saying, look, dude, it's not doing you no good. You're constantly triggered. You're always feeling persecuted by, you know, people. You're a traumatized person yourself. Leave it, you know, move on. You've done your bit now. You've done your bit in that community, raising awareness, whatever.
Do you think maybe that those people are the ones that haven't quite, how do I phrase this? I feel like those are the people that haven't found enough bravery within themselves yet to be able to move on, because to move on is very confronting, because to move on, you have to acknowledge weak parts of yourself. You have to acknowledge work to do on yourself. You have to make apologies to the people that you've screwed over in your life and let down and left in fear. It's, excuse me, to move on is a hugely brave thing to undertake. And it is a big thing to undertake. Now, I've personally found huge strength in moving on. It did take me a while. And I would hope that no one would ever describe me as someone who wore it as a badge of honor, but I certainly wallowed for more than I probably should have, and felt sorry for myself for longer than I should have. I don't think that helped me particularly, but equally, I don't think that moving on too quickly will help some people either. You know, there's a difference between actually moving on and moving on, right? Yeah. And if you're someone who can, yesterday no longer exists, and you can go, bosh, logic brain takes over, box that stuff away where it's not going to rear its head again, and I'm genuinely okay, move on, brilliant. That's strength. Yeah, that's amazing. I am more someone who has to sit with the pain for a while, process it, feel it, and then make a conscious decision that now I'm going to move on. I'm a big fan. I talk a lot about reframing. You reframe what's going on around you. You reframe your pain. You reframe what things mean and what things feel like and what things look like. It's the same thing, but you're just giving it a different perspective. And it's that switch from negative thought to positive thought that then carries you through. And a brilliant phrase, in fact, that I saw an interview with who's the Big, the guy from the actor from Big, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks. They said, "What's one bit of advice you'd give anyone, or something you'd wish you knew when you were younger?" And he said, "Simple. This too shall pass." And that's all it was. And that was a reference to good things and bad things. You're on top of the world right now. You're brilliant. You're loving life. Everything is great. This too will pass. There will be a bad day coming. Don't think that don't be caught out by that feeling that you're riding a wave now, because there will be some crap times in the future. And when you're on your knees and feeling broken and life's really on top of you, this too shall pass. It won't always be like this. There are good times coming. And I think when you accept that life is a roller coaster, when you accept that the pursuit of happiness is not the pursuit of happiness every single day, because it doesn't exist. The pursuit of happiness is having enough around you, enough happiness in your life, so that when the bad days come, you've got people to lean on, people to support you, and people to share it with, so that those bad days don't feel overwhelming.
Absolutely. Let's move on then, Ricky, because I like long form podcasts, because literally I'd love to chat this through with you for hours and hours. You're always welcome to come back on the show and have another chat. But for the sake of keeping things a bit concise and moving forward, you and I think, are no stranger to substance use and addiction. And how did that develop? I mean, for me, I had a few parties back in the day, back in the dance era. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Probably made a dick of myself on more than one occasion. But I had some I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about life. I learned so much about unity consciousness and also the music. It was thoroughly enlightening. The problem was, when I left the military and I was living in Hong Kong, I got introduced to crystal meth, and it's like it was a different ball game. You know, for me, I thought it was the key in the lock for like who I am, and I can't get deep down in psychological, because it wasn't like that. I wasn't like analysing my life. I wasn't thinking that I was a severely damaged individual, like, you know, some of the stuff I've been through in my life, and I'm talking at an age where you can't process it. Yeah. I'd never thought about, I just thought I was a normal geezer, just, you know, a few quirky things, but, and this substance, Ricky, was like, whoa, boom. I felt like the person I was meant to be. I felt razor sharp,
dangerous,
fucking handsome. I was, you know, it just like everything. And I remember making a decision. I thought, well, I want to live like this, you know. Okay, maybe I'll die young. Okay, that's a trade-off. But like, this is me. This is what I was put on earth to feel. And 6 months later, 7 months later, all my business had collapsed, and I was working as a nightclub doorman for the 14K triads in Wan Chai in Hong Kong. Watching my mates get chopped up with bloody meat cleavers and stuff, and not literally watching, but that was my new playground, you know. And I was so chronically mentally unwell. I ended up trying to crawl across a cable between two skyscrapers. Everything in my mind was telling me that's why, like in the Marines, we'd learned to do this kind of thing, was like to get across this cable, and I'd get across, and if I could make it to the other side, we're talking like 70 meters above the ground or something. Wow. Like I'd get all my answers. I mean, that's how, and it didn't stop there. I came back to the UK and I had another 18 months of living in squalor, smashing up everything that came across my way. No relationship, all my relationships gone. I was living on porridge, oats and pasta. That's all I could afford, because I spent all my money on gear. And then finally one day, I had my epiphany, and I'm kind of a bit of an interesting case study, because I'm not like, I never went to like AA or the church or the doctors.
Yeah.
Or I've never done any of that.
You just came to your senses.
Yeah, I never stopped partying either, which maybe I shouldn't broadcast. But I
Yeah.
learned to tame it down to the point where now I even question like what's. I don't actually think it like does anything for me anymore. I really do like the early mornings, going for a run, the plunge pool, the sauna, meditation and all. But we're all on our own journey, is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. And I'm interested to know, how did all that kick off for you?
Well, it kind of crept in. To be honest, I'd always partied like yourself. My drug of choice had always been cocaine. So it would be on a night out, a couple of cheeky lines here and there, nothing big, would never buy it, would just get a little bit off a mate who was doing some. I'd have a good night, I'd go home, I'd get a good night's sleep, I'd get up and go to work. No problems. Unfortunately, it's something that goes on in the fire service that should probably change is the medicals are 3 yearly and you get 28 days notice. So, there is no random testing. So for someone who's a casual drug user, it's an ideal job. You can just do what you want pretty much. The only time you're ever going to be tested is if someone at your station thinks you're under the influence and then calls it up the road and says, I think someone here is drunk or using drugs. And to be honest with you, the way the service is, most governors would just say to you, Rick, you're not supposed to be here today. I suggest you go home. And they'd book you sick and you'd go home. And that would be your shot across the bow.
Wow, yeah.
So
you're in London as well. You're in London. I mean, it's almost like goes with the territory, doesn't it? That
exactly.
People are going to be.
At one point, I had more friends that did it than didn't. It was just a norm, a casual norm. You go back to anyone's house after a night out, someone pulls some coke out, I then want a little bump. That's how it was. And to be honest with you, whilst I would never condone drug use, because ultimately it is utterly pointless, it was always okay for me in terms of I was always fully in control of it. I never went on a night out needing it or wanting it necessarily. I never lost sleep, and I never didn't go somewhere the next day that I should have gone, whether it was work or an engagement or whatever it was. I always did everything. It wasn't affecting my life in any way, shape, or form. It was very minimal use. Alcohol, I was a binge drinker, a bit younger and stuff, so I was going out on a Friday night. I'd get very drunk. I'd have a hangover for half of Saturday. I'd go out Saturday night, get very drunk, have a hangover for half of Sunday, unless I was working the next day, in which case I would take it easy. That's how it was. Grenfell happened, and it was like the life had been sucked out of me overnight. I had no fervor for anything anymore. I had no excitement in me. Nothing made me want to go, oh yeah, let's do that. Numb, just completely numb. And when you're numb, you look for a buzz. And so initially what I started with was alcohol. So the poem that you showed at the start, or a clip of that film, I wrote that poem a couple of weeks after the fire, sitting on my couch, absolutely smashed on beer and staring at my fireplace, floods of tears. And I just thought I'd always written poetry anyway. So I was like, I need to write something. And that poem just fell out of me. It was written inside 5 minutes. And that was then the start of that sort of side of my journey, which was a bit weird because whilst I was really struggling and drowning, all of these amazing things were happening off the back of that poem as well. TV appearances and a cinema screening for a film festival and all of, I'm a Man United fan, going on Man United TV. They invited us up to the ground and filmed an interview about mental health with that. It's all of these incredible things going on. But meanwhile, I was falling further and further and further down that dark, dark slope of alcohol and drug abuse. And it got to the point with cocaine where I was doing it at the station. I'm on duty. and I'm getting a delivery to the fire station, and I'm going out, meeting the guy in his car, picking up, coming back to the station, and sitting up all night and doing 2 or 3 grams of coke on a night shift, still driving a fire engine, still responding to emergencies. Imagine if I had had an accident, killed someone, killed a member of my crew, good friends. The levels of irresponsibility are shameful. But as you know, it's very difficult to see that when you're in it. At the time, the only time I felt alive or in control of myself was when I was high. And so I sought to get high all the time. I was, as a little sideline, I was making balloon animals at kids' parties. I know that's a random thing, but I was doing this at kids' birthday parties. And I would regularly turn up to a kid's birthday party on a Sunday morning and I'd be high. Still from the night before, I'd had no sleep. And I'm there in someone's front room making balloon animals. Now, again, it's shameful. If I had, as a parent, if a man turned up to my son's birthday party as an entertainer and was high on coke, and I found out, someone's calling the police, and it won't be for him, it would be to get me off of him. Like, how dare you bring that crap around my kid? And yet there I was doing it.
I think you're being quite humble. I just want to say, like, most of my life's been like that, mate. And no, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I wouldn't want to put off anyone out there who's struggling, that thinks this is abnormal behavior. It's not. It's the fucking norm these days. You got a drug problem, or you're on the piss. You ain't abnormal. You're like the normal. But reach out and get some support. But Ricky, I know exactly what you mean when you turn up for a scenario. You know, I'm not, Ricky, I know you know what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you know, this is what traumatized people have to deal with, and I'm not proud of it. I'm not trying to promote it. I'm just saying that there's.
Sorry, go on.
No, I'm just saying that in society, you know, I guess we got to reduce the stigma around it and start understanding why traumatized people are, you know, what I mean, in this example, why traumatized people and substance misuse goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and they really do. And again, to be fair, when you look at creativity, and again, to add, this isn't condoning drug use or saying get out there and do it, but if you listen to some of the Beatles music, those guys are absolutely off their tits. They were at LSD and all over the place. And you know, quite often in creative people, substance misuse, and I think the key term there is misuse rather than abuse, because I think substance abuse is when you've gone past that point of misuse. For me, substance abuse is I can't do anything without this, and it's actually not helping me anymore. Substance misuse is a step down from that, I would say. And at that point, you know, I've written some of my best poetry when I've been utterly broken, in immense amounts of emotional pain, and high off my tits. And I've read it to someone and they've gone, "Oh my God, that's so insightful." And I'm like, yeah, I was smashed when I wrote that. And and you're right, you know, it tends to be the case. It's why so many creative people in the public eye, famous people, you know, some of the best musicians you could name regularly were on drugs, writing music and stuff. You know, it does stuff to your brain, or can do stuff to your brain that is both positive and negative. The trick is being well enough to see when it switches from one to the other and being able to control it. You know, the danger is when you're drawing money out on a credit card to go and get 3 grams of coke because it's Wednesday night and you've got a night on your own. That's the problem. And that wasn't enjoyable, you know, that those nights I would just sit there depressed at the thought that this is what I'm doing. I'd hate on myself while I did it. But then each line got bigger so I could try and get that buzz again. You know, and it's true that peak gets smaller each time and the low from it gets lower each time. And you end up way below normal and needing huge amounts of drugs to perk yourself back up. And as you've found spirituality, I have found my speaking company, and that gives me so much joy. And waking up with a clear head, jumping in my car, driving to part of the country and inspiring 200 17, 18-year-olds, or going into a prison as part of their reform and talking to them about all of this sort of stuff, and trying to inspire some hope in them that they are more and can be more than society deems them at the moment. Making real changes in people's lives is so much more fulfilling than sitting on a bed on my own on a Wednesday night with 3 grams of coke and Pornhub.
Absolutely. Yes. It's kind of weird in the end, because if I just say the old white stuff, I always wonder why the fuck I do it. It's literally like volunteering to pay for the effect of going to the dentist.
Yeah.
But on a, you know, on a big scale, and then you go away and you're like, I'm okay. This morning I was buzzing. I was happy with life. I was up for a run. I was like, you know, firing. I was on the phone to my mate who I hadn't spoke to for a while. I was, you know, putting this good energy out. I was on this level with my family that you know, it's just like I'm the perfect partner and father and da-da. And now I've just like poisoned myself, and I'm numb as fuck, and I'm not even enjoying it. It's just, it's not, I know different things affect people differently, but even the stuff back in the day, the you know, the crystal stuff, that, you know, I've tried that since, and I just end up sitting there going, why the fuck did I do that? Why have I done it? My life's perfect, and I've just fucked it up.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, when I was doing it before, you know, you probably have a point in time that is the you before the incident or the you after the incident, right? And for me, obviously, the Grenfell is the timeline I use. So the me pre-Grenfell would go out, as I said, have a bit of a party, have a couple of lines of coke, and I'd be happy, I'd be great, I'd have a good night. I'd be chatting to people and, you know, blah, 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 which is the normal me. People used to say, you can never tell when you're on it, Rick, you don't change. And that was the first warning sign for me. Like, why am I doing it? If it's not really doing anything, why am I doing it? And I guess it was a social thing. You know, it was people are doing it. You're fitting in. I don't really know.
How did you have your wake up call, Rick? What did you have, like a low point? Or?
I had a low point with my mental health and with the drugs. The low point with my mental health was I got up to get a glass of water one day, and I literally just sort of slumped to the floor, and I felt this crushing, overwhelming sadness. Like it was like a physical weight of sadness that was all consuming. And I just burst into tears sitting on my floor, and I realized at that point I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to stop crying. And then I thought, this sadness is never going to go away. It's never going to leave me, which means this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. And then logically your brain goes, well, if this is how you're going to feel for the rest of your life, what's the point in living the rest of your life? And that was the first time I had any encounter with suicidal thoughts or thinking I'm going to kill myself. And in that moment, I genuinely thought, I'm just going to kill myself because I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be in this pain anymore. And luckily, I've got lots of people around me that are very understanding and very supportive. And so I had lots of people I could call. Well, I think my moment wasn't as ethereal. It wasn't as much of an epiphany, I think, as yours. My one was, I guess, ultimately a realization of what I was losing. And that ultimately boiled down to my son. My son was 3 when I split with his mum in the midst of all of my crap, or sorry, 4, in the midst of all of my crap. And I had become a violent dad. He'd come to see me and I would beat him and hit him and smack him. I once smacked him so hard, he wet himself on the spot where he stood. And he was like 7 at that point. You know, this isn't happening in 6 months. This was a 3-year period where I had a hair trigger temper and I would fly off the handle. And I wasn't often violent with him. I think it was a couple of occasions, but they were big occasions. And it was the realization that I had become the one man I disliked most in my life, which was my stepdad.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah,
I'd become him. And at that point, you're like, I'm going to push my son into exactly the same crap that I was pushed into, that I'm resentful about, and that I have had to spend years unfucking myself over. And that's what I'm doing. And in that moment, I decided I have to do better. And that was then, embarking on getting off drugs, more counselling, leaving the relationship that I'd got into after his mum, because it was very toxic. And that was also a violent relationship in terms of she had a son that was extremely violent, one of those London kids that's grown up in a white, nice area, but can't help but talk like this. What are you doing, fam? Shut up, bruv. And all of that nonsense. And, you know, just violent with his mum, aggressive. It was like leaving one traumatic environment and moving straight into this carnage that what I needed was peace. I just didn't know I needed it. And unfortunately, when you're so familiar with carnage, that's what you believe to be your comfort zone. This looks familiar. Carnage. Great. I know how to deal with it because this is my life. And really, you're craving some peace and some harmony. And so changing that relationship was great. And then I had an opportunity to do a parenting course. And I'm going to give this company a shout out, if you don't mind. Unlocking Potential. They're a registered charity. They were the company that were brought in, or charity that were brought in to help my son, because he was having troubles at school, and so therefore was having counselling. And most of his counselling sessions were based around daddy's PTSD, daddy's aggression, daddy this, daddy that. And to find that out obviously was crushing.
Is this the unlockingpotential.org.uk? Transforming life chances for children.
That's the one. Yeah.
I don't want to make sure I'm showing people the right thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're the ones. So they then reached out to me via my son's mum and said, would you like to take a parenting course? And I was like, no, I wouldn't. Thanks very much. And then I thought, what am I doing? Learn. The more you learn, the more chance you've got of sorting yourself out. So I said, yes, I'll take the parenting course. And it was the best thing I ever did. It allowed me to revisit situations with my son and make apologies where they needed to be made, to genuinely heal my relationship with him. And I've since, post that 12-week program with them, I've then gone on. My son's relationship with me is amazing. He runs towards me now, jumps up and hugs me, and he loves coming to stay with me. He loves my partner now. And the company have now asked me to come back and deliver a talk for them, very short talk, at a fundraising event to let potential investors know what the difference it's made to me. And they've since now asked to have me on board as their first official ambassador. So it just goes to show that turnaround from being my stepdad to owning my shit and making a success out of what could have been a horrific part. And what it takes, as always in all of these situations, is that self-honesty and that bravery to go, I am shit at the moment, yes, it does hurt to say that. I need to be better. How can I do that?
Mate, if it's any consolation, I had 3 stepdads, so I think
Fucking hell.
you can work out the maths on that one.
Yeah.
Ricky,
I feel like
I just
your trauma trumps mine
no,
from the
no,
childhood.
mate, trauma's freaking trauma, and it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm always saying this. I mean, I can't talk for anyone else, but I saw we served in the Northern Ireland conflict. We saw a lot of action, I would say, from what I see from other people, and you know, and us. When I look at Afghanistan, whoa, that's probably like next level to what we experienced. But for example, we had 171 incidents in one day. That's bombings, shootings, robbings, hijackings, buses being hijacked and set on fire. That's petrol bombs, riots, I've said this a few times before. The jock behind me got shot 3 times. Then the gunman turned his sights on me. That was an exciting day. I was leading a patrol, even though I was only a Marine. My section commander, Clive, said, "Chris, you lead the patrol today," and we were in the countryside. And as I stepped into a gateway, this round literally whizzed across my face. And anyway, my point is, I fucking loved it, Ricky. I found, you know, and no disrespect. Yeah, no disrespect to our wonderful brother who got killed, but that didn't faze me at all. Yeah. At all.
It's weird though, isn't it? Because I've had the same with fires. I've been in fires where I've nearly lost my life and got trapped and things are just going wrong. And at the time, your adrenaline pumping and you're absolutely crapping your pants. And then you come out of the situation and you laugh about it.
And the thing is, it's the childhood stuff that fucked me up. Absolutely, just deeply. When you experience stuff at an age where you can't make sense of it, you're too young. You're fucking 2 years old, for fuck's sake. 3 years old, 4.
Well, to put this into perspective for people, I once wrote a poem that was then used by the NSPCC as part of an advertising campaign, and it's called "The Key in the Lock." And the premise of the poem is literally, it starts off with that feeling I got every time I heard my stepdad's key go in the lock of the front door. That feeling I would get in the pit of my stomach. I'd start shaking. It would make me feel physically sick just by hearing a key go in the front door. Now that key going in the front door for in a loving family, it's a joyous moment. It's a moment when someone you love is coming home from work and you get to run up and see them and ask about their day. For me, it was a wall of fear that would fall over me. And when you consider that's every day from 5 until I eventually went to live with my dad in London at 12, that's 7 years from 5 to 12 of a constant state of heightened adrenaline. That is exhausting. And that's why that has such an impact on you when you get older.
Yeah, I just want to say, mate, it's really brave of you to tell us everything that you've said, and I feel so fortunate in a way. I didn't become a father until I was like 47 or something, and I hate to think what kind of parent I would have been if I'd done that before, because I could feel the trauma coming through me. I could feel the intergenerational trauma. I'm just saying, you know, we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I could feel like the darkness in me at times. You know, and I mean, Jesus, if I'd probably had children earlier, I could imagine the social services would have had to step. I mean, I was just lost in chronic drug use for 18, almost over 2 years, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
to be honest, the only reason social services weren't involved with my kid is because he's got an amazing mum. And, you know, she had a choice: stick by me when I was getting worse, or get me out early enough that I wasn't able to do too much damage to my boy. And then walk the tightrope of facilitating visitation off of her own back, even when my son didn't want to come and see me and would cry as she's saying, "You have to go and see your dad," knowing full well that I wasn't brilliant at that point, and knowing full well that he was fearful of me. And but she knew that if she had allowed him to not come and see me, I now wouldn't know my son. It would have been too late to repair that damage. I just wouldn't know my son now. And, you know, that must be a horrendously hard thing for a mother to do. The person she loves most in the world, to send him off into an environment the kid's fearful of.
Absolutely. Yes. So, Ricky, fascinating chat. I'm just thinking there's two things I want to come on. One is to SAS Who Dares Wins, because that's a classic experience, that is.
Yeah.
But what makes up your routine then now? How do you keep on top of your mental health? What things do you do?
First thing I think that's really important is acknowledging the link between your senses and how that makes you feel, like as in the direct link between your mental health and your senses. For instance, if you're walking down the road and a woman walks past you that's wearing the same perfume as your first girlfriend, what do you think of? What perfume it is, or the girlfriend? The girlfriend. Or a time you spent with that girlfriend. It could be, oh God, it will literally take you back to, I remember the tree I was walking past in the park 13 years ago, or whatever that is. So there is a really direct link between your senses. Same with sight, same with sound, same with taste. So what I've tried to do is, if I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a day where things are a bit on top of me, I'm a bit down on motivation, I will look at what my senses can give me back. So favorite songs, put on my favorite aftershave, go to one of my favorite places, and I make a conscious decision. This is what I'm going to do. Not do I feel like doing it, because the answer is no. You don't feel like doing it. When you're feeling down and miserable and shit, you don't feel like getting up and going and doing something. So you have to force yourself to do it. And so the first step, I think, is acknowledging, well, I have to force myself to do this. Once you're at peace with that, now it's no longer a choice. So I'm just going to go, or I'm just going to listen to this music. So that's one thing I do. Fitness is definitely another massive thing. And again, it is difficult because if you exercise, your body produces endorphins. It makes you feel better, but loads of different stuff going on in your body. You're flooded with feel-good shit, right? But when you're feeling down, or you're having a bad day, again, you don't feel like exercising. So again, you have to force yourself to do these things. And again, it's about making peace with, in order for me to feel better, I have to take control of things that are going to facilitate that. There's no point waiting for the day to arrive when I feel motivated, because it won't arrive. No point waiting for the day you feel okay, because it won't arrive. Because what you're doing is eating crap food, still taking drugs, sitting in bed all day with your curtains closed. All of the things, you're removing all of the opportunities for all of the things that are actually going to facilitate you feeling better. So it's not about how you feel, it's about what you know. So educate yourself. You know that if you go for a run, you will feel better. That's a fact. So go for a run. Don't wait until you feel like going for one. Take control. And obviously, there's the same things that people always talk about in terms of counseling, reaching out, speaking to people. The reason, I got in touch with you about recording this is because this for me is a cathartic process. I enjoy talking about this stuff, because when I finish this talk with you today, I'm going to walk away with a great big smile on my face, look at where I live, look at how my life is, and go, do you know what? I've come a long way. And having this chat today will remind me of how well I am doing compared to how poorly I could be doing. So, talking about this stuff is definitely a huge thing. and poetry for me. You know, I write poetry a lot. I write less now that I'm happy. In fairness, but I've written some stuff that I would consider, is it arrogant to say important? It was important for me, but it's been helpful for other people. You know, the Grenfell poem has helped loads of people. I wrote one called The Darkness, which is about how it feels to be suffering with depression and PTSD. It's not about what causes it. It's about how you actually feel. That one's been received really well, was used in a mental health campaign not long ago by a guy that runs a company, ex-sailor, called, his company's called Tough to Talk. And it's about getting men to open up. And he used the poem to launch his online profile. The one about the for the NSPCC, you know, there have been lots of different poems I've written. They've become more filled with hope towards the end, towards me reaching a better state of mental health. And now really I talk about hope. And when I write about hope. I write about how empowering it feels to be back in control of your life. Now I feel like nothing can beat me. Doesn't matter what life throws at me, because if I can get through all of that and be here, what more could possibly come that it is going to challenge me more than that learning process? Because even if the things are bigger, I have all of the tools now. I've learned what the feelings feel like, what the situations look like. I know the warning signs. I can stop drinking if I think, oh, I'm having a bit of a wobble. Do you know what? From past history, I know it's a good time to stop drinking. I'll go teetotal for 6 months until I don't feel like that anymore. And I'll just routinely do things like that.
You've done a lot of speaking. You've been on a lot of TV shows. That's quite a brave thing to do, isn't it? I think most people would probably shy away from public sort of events. How's it been? How have you been received? How have you been treated? How do you manage it all?
I'm very lucky in that I always say a bit ADHD. Other people in my life would say I'm very ADHD. There are lots of drawbacks to that, but there are also lots of strengths. My son calls them superpowers. He's been diagnosed with Tourette's and ADHD. He's very much like me in terms of he loves a chat. And one of the superpowers, as he will call it, is you could stick me in a room with 1,000 people in there that are waiting to be impressed, and you could say, talk to them about dolphins. And I'll just go. I'll just start. I don't feel scared. I don't feel conscious. What if they think I'm rubbish? There's none of that. I just think it's talking. I'm sure I can find some interesting things to say about dolphins. I'm sure I can link it to something that I do know something about somewhere along the line. You can ask people, you know, there's 1,000,001 ways to get the job done. And so when it comes to standing on stage and speaking to people in front of rooms full of people, I just think, do you know what? As long as I keep my talk honest and real, there's nothing to be fearful of, because everything that I talk about is something I've been through. I can't get the story wrong. It doesn't matter if it doesn't flow perfectly every time. Sometimes I'll forget things and go, sorry, just before that happened, this happened, and I'll take them back a bit. It doesn't matter. If what you want is a PowerPoint and someone going, when the brain works this way, then fair enough, but that's a lecture. That's not a motivational talk. So when it comes to speaking publicly, I just want to be really real. I want to be honest. I want to be authentic. I want to be raw. And I want to talk about feelings, because everybody has them, whether they like to admit it or not, whether they're in tune with them or not. If you talk to someone about a situation and tell them what that situation will do to you, you're going to miss the mark. You're going to get it wrong, because they might not have been in that situation. So straight away, disassociation. If I describe something I've been through and talk explicitly about how I felt in those moments, what a listener will do is think about how they felt in their moment. They will take that feeling, go, I felt like that. It was when this happened. And now they're on board. They're on the journey with you, because what you're simultaneously doing is thinking about the feelings, not the situation. And when you can do that, you can connect with an audience on any subject, and you can connect with an audience on quite a deep level. So when you get emotive, they get emotive. When you laugh, they sense the joy in what you're saying. And it becomes a very empowering thing to do. And it also makes you very difficult to attack. What could you, at the end of this chat, what could you possibly say to me that's going to hurt me? All you're going to be able to tell me is what I've already given you. You're not going to be able to disclose some big dark secret about me smacking my kid and making him wet himself, because I've already told you that. So am I ashamed of it? Yeah. But will it hurt me when you bring it up, or if you put it out there in the ether? No. So it actually makes you really incredibly strong, incredibly hard to damage when you are honest enough to share it all.
Yeah, I mean, fucking hell, that shit goes on, mate. You know, I remember getting dragged across the school playground by my headmaster. I was like 6 or 7. I was so terrified.
Yeah.
I remember it. You know, and I'd done something silly. I think I'd written Willie on the public toilet. We used to have public toilets in them days. You know, you don't have them now. And we're walking home from school, and for some reason, someone got a pencil out and went, "Chris, I dare you to write Willie like on the wall." And I remember feeling it was quite exciting to be doing this naughty sort of thing. But of course, we got home. My sister went, "Mum, Chris wrote Willie on the toilet." Whoa. My mum was never one for, like, you know, dealing with things in house. Straight on the phone to the headmaster. Next thing, I'm getting dragged in front of the whole school by my hair across the playground.
Wow.
I just, like, if it's possible to go unconscious while still being conscious, that's what I did. You know, I was utterly terrified. And, you know, these are conversations that we need to have, and not bury, is what I'm trying to say. So you know, you're a very brave man, Ricky, and you know.
And also, to be fair, audiences are very kind with people like yourself and I, because I think, firstly, being men gives us an advantage, because not many men will talk about emotive things or talk about feelings. More and more these days, thankfully, but still, I would say we're in the minority, not the majority. And when you've had what would be considered quite manly, masculine backgrounds, look quite manly and masculine, I think people are more easily impressed by a sensitive, soft side than, you know, if I turned up and I'm going to say something really stereotypical now, but, you know, look like your typical sort of IT geek or whatever, you know, and people would look and be like, well, yeah, I'd imagine, you know, it's great that he's a sensitive person. I'd expect him to be sensitive. When someone like myself turns up, I think people are often quite taken aback by the things I discuss and the way that I speak, because everyone, no matter how much they try not to, will have a judgment, you know, a pre-meet judgment on who they're going to get. If Firefighter's going to talk about mental health, you know, they're probably thinking it's going to be a PowerPoint with facts and figures and all quite sterile. And in actual fact, you know, it's quite an emotive, I would say maybe a bit of a roller coaster journey through life, ending with some, you know, amazing stories of hope and success. So audiences are always very kind to me. What I'm trying to say.
So finally, did Ant Middleton try and borrow money off you? Did you seriously? I've heard you've got to hide your wallet when you're around him.
Is that what you've heard?
Credit cards have gone missing. No, he's a lovely bloke, Ant. I'm really, you know, his career's gone well. I think he fell foul of Channel 4, I seem to remember, because he's an honest bloke and he spoke out about honest things, and of course the mainstream media don't like that. But when were you on Who Dares Wins?
I was on the season 6, whatever year that was. The years are a bit blurry. I think it was 2021 it was aired. Maybe 2021 I think it was aired.
Was that pre all the COVID
No,
stuff?
so it was towards the back end of COVID, so maybe it's 22 then, I'm not sure. But when we went away to film, we went up to Scotland to film, we had to isolate for 10 days in a hotel room individually before we were allowed to start filming. So day one for us was actually day 11.
Okay.
In terms of the COVID stuff, obviously, yeah, we were left alone. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a weird start, because normally, you know, you get selected and then you fly up, you go to a hotel overnight, and the next morning it starts. You've got no time to sort of think. Then I found that I got a lot out of the show in the 10 days of isolation. I wasn't in a brilliant place when it came round. I was sort of hoping to have been in a better place by the time filming started, and I hadn't quite got there. And 10 days in a hotel room for some of the recruits from my intake was hell on earth. For me, it was amazing. I literally took about 15 Airfix models up with me to build in my room. So I was just high on glue all day and painting stuff, and I just had a great time. I turned my phone off. I'd come off all of my social media. It was a genuine isolation for me. And on top of that, I basically built an Excel spreadsheet that counted for every minute of my day. And I would go, I'm going to wake up at this time every day. I'm going to run at this time every day. I'm going to come back to my hotel room at this time. I'm going to eat breakfast at this time. And every minute was accounted for. And for the first time in my life, you know, it's like when you do shift, you don't have any routine. For the first time in my life, I had 10 days of solid routine that were built around mental wellness, physical fitness, health. You're up in Scotland, so there's mountains to climb and run up and stuff. And we were only allowed out for an hour a day. And you were being regularly tested for COVID, and you weren't allowed to speak to any other recruits. So you were on doing these things on your own. But for me, it was brilliant. And I got a lot of what I needed out of those 10 days. And I remember a phone call to my dad the night before the actual filming of the show started. And I said, Dad, I don't know if I want to do this. And he my dad's ex-Remy. So he was like, whoa, what do you mean? You've got a great opportunity. Go and do it. And I was like, well, I'm not saying I'm not going to do it, Dad. I just feel at peace. And he said, to be fair, Rick, you sound really peaceful. I said, I think I found what I needed just in 10 days of getting away from everything. I think I just needed a break. And then, of course, the next morning you're thrown back into the turmoil of everyone screaming in your face and kicking muddy water at you and calling you every word under the sun. So it was a bit of a shock to the system, really, for the first few hours of that show. But yeah, I really enjoyed 10 days in the lead up to it a lot more than I enjoyed the measly 2 days I survived on the show.
Who's the black lad on the DS?
Oh, he's brilliant. He's from Stoke. Oh God, what's his name? I'm on my phone, so I can't look. I can't remember his name. We follow each other on Instagram still. Really lovely bloke.
Yeah, it's just oh, hang on a sec. Lost me cursor. We're getting a like and subscribe, folks. Where am I? Where's me? Just bear with me one sec. I just wondered if it's the chap I've just been put in touch.
Melvin Downs.
Melvin, yes. Oh, shout out to Melvin then, because
just came to me.
Yeah, no, my lovely friend Neil, who's been helping out the channel, has just put us in touch. In fact, I haven't replied to Melvin yet, but
lovely bloke.
Yeah, that's
really
that's what I've heard. We thought we'll get him on the show.
Yeah. Me and him had a couple of little sort of off camera, not off camera as in there is no off camera. It's always been recorded, but while the cameras were busy elsewhere, and you're sort of in a queue to climb up a ladder on your rig, I think it was. Me and him had a brief chat, just asked me a little bit about myself, and you could tell he's someone who he isn't there because he's a bully. He's there because he wants to help people find something within themselves so they can succeed at life. You know, he struck me certainly as someone who really wants everyone around him to succeed and be doing well.
Yeah, that's one of the good characteristics about service life. So it's definitely in the Marines. The blokes there want you to do well. Not all of
Yeah,
them. You do get some right dicks, but
of course.
the vast majority, they just, when they think really carefully about the recruits, they look at their foibles and their weaknesses, and they discuss how can we empower them to to do better and get a result here.
Yeah.
So, do you think that your Grenfell background was the thing that got you on the show, or
It was definitely the thing that got me on the show. Yeah, I mean, the application process was a bit strange because I started the online application. One night I was drunk and at home, and I thought, you know what, that looks like a laugh. Why not? And to be honest with you, without wanting to sound arrogant, I thought I already do loads of the stuff they'd have to do on there, climbing over things on ropes and abseiling and stuff like that as it's part of my life. So I was like, I'll look really good on TV. I'll smash that. No problem. So I, drunkenly started applying, got about halfway through the application and realised very quickly every question was coming back to Grenfell, everything. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to go on the show and it be about Grenfell because I don't want to exploit something so horrendous and just for my 15 minutes on TV. So I didn't complete the application. What I didn't realize is it auto saves at various different points. So they already had a partial application. And then I started getting emails saying, don't forget to complete your application. And I thought it was an automated thing. It may have been. And then one day I got an actual email from a person at the studio saying, we've been trying to get in touch with you. We think you'd be good on the show. Yeah, would you like to have, would you be willing to speak to someone? I think was the way it's put. Would you be willing to speak to one of our casting directors? So I was like, I just thought, I'll put it, why not? So I said, yeah, sure, I'll speak to your casting director. So one day my phone rings and it's this casting director. I've answered it, having a chat for about an hour and a half. And then at the end of it, he said, oh, congratulations, you've passed the interview stage. And I was like, oh, right, I didn't realise this was part of the application. I thought this was, I don't know, like just a chat. And he said, no. So if you can now do these physical things, because it was COVID, all that I had to video myself doing the things remotely and then send them into them so they could verify it was all legit. So they knew I was fit enough to do it. And then there were a couple of other interview sections and a mental health assessment and stuff. And of course, that was the one I was most worried about because I really wasn't in a brilliant spot. But I'm very good at saying what's needed at a time when it's needed, as you do when you have addiction. You get very good at telling the right type of lie. And so passed everything. And that was that. Yeah, went up for the show, hated every minute of it, left early.
What was the hardest thing you had to do?
Honestly, for 8.5 years, I've been a firefighter. Now, anyone from the military listening to this, I understand I'm a melt. I understand that. I understand I wouldn't get through basic training in the military because that's all this show is. Being cold and soaking wet and stood out in the cold, shivering, being screamed at, I just thought, you know what? I don't need this in my life. I'm not here. I thought I was there to prove to everyone how good I was. And what I realized very quickly is I didn't need that. I didn't care about that. What I wanted was a platform to talk about PTSD so that, millions of people are going to watch it. And if one person watches that and goes, you know what, that's how I am, I need some help, then it's been worth it. Great. As soon as I had an opportunity to sort of tell my background story and, talk about the PTSD side of things, I was happy. And I was like, I don't need to be here now. But I thought I'll stay all the while I'm enjoying it, I'll stay. And obviously it's not designed to be enjoyed, is it? It's designed to make you uncomfortable, test your resilience and your mettle. And I just thought, I am sail every day. I'm a rope access technician away from work. I'm on the rope rescue competition team for the London Fire Brigade. I'm an urban search and rescue trained person. I use all these cool tools. I box, all of the things that are the carrots that they're going to say, if you get through this, but you get to do this. I do it anyway. So then I thought, well, why am I here? is it about showing the public how capable I am because I need that affirmation? Or is it about staying because I got no choice because my friends are going to absolutely rip it out of me if I only stay 2 days? In which case, I'm here for the wrong reasons on both counts. Because I shouldn't need anyone's affirmation, and I shouldn't care what my mates are going to say about me if I'm happy with who and what I am. And so I got to a point very quickly where I'd been cold and wet for 2 days. I'd barely slept the night before. I'd shown myself in a bit of a good light doing an abseil off the bottom of an oil rig to show that I'm mildly capable. And when I had an opportunity to bail, yeah, I just chucked it in.
I don't know if I'd think that deeply about it. Maybe that's a Marines thing, I don't know, but I'd just be there. I'd be like, right, I ain't fucking leaving.
Yeah, this is what I mean, though. And
Yeah.
this is why I made a point of saying to the DS when I left, this isn't for everyone. And bearing in mind what I did, I was there for 2 days, bear in mind, but the few bits I did on those 2 days is comparative, and the whole course, which is only 12 days, is comparative only from what my ex-military friends have said, basic military training. It's not equivalent to Marines. It's not equivalent to paras. It's not equivalent to the SAS or SPS.
So are you saying then if you'd won that show, you wouldn't be in the SAS now?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I thought that was actually, I thought that's where they recruited all their people from.
Yeah, it would. I think it would be. I think the SAS wouldn't be as world renowned if that were the case.
Mate, they need Vanessa Phelps in the. They bloody do. You know, and what's his name?
Yeah.
That Schofield chap. You know, I can imagine him taking out an embassy with his little puppet things. Or I'm getting confused now, aren't I?
Gordon the Goat. No, that was Andy Peters. When Gordon the Goat. I don't know. Yeah. I tell you what, honestly, the little time I spent there did make me realise how absolutely capable all you boys are. Like, you know, I mean, Foxy, he ran up the mountain past me, throwing looks of disdain at my pathetic attempt to climb up the side of this, what he called a hill, which I referred to as a mountain. And then he would regularly come back to hurl abuse at me, slag me off and go back up again. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to get up the first time, and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure he's a few years older than me, and he is just going up and down this mountain like he's on the flat. And it's in moments like that you realise, you know, when you look at things on TV and you go, oh, I'd smash that. I'd have been good at that job. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't, or you'd have done it. And how what you've just said there perfectly sums it up. Once you're there, you go, I'm just not leaving, and you wouldn't, and you'd get to the end and you'd finish it. And they go, congratulations, you know, you've passed the selection course. People like me, my arena is extreme heat. Yeah, that's my comfort zone. My comfort zone is not in my pants shivering in a concrete yard in the north of Scotland in, you know, the back end of September. That's horrible. That's horrific for me.
Hey, don't forget, I said I'd hang in now. Didn't say I'd pass it. That's two different things.
Yeah, but I mean, the what do they call them? Chemical, biological, nuclear warfare things of the mask. Yeah, where they throw gas, they gas you in a thing, and you've got to take your mask off, say your name, and bail out a window.
Did you do that?
Basic.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I wasn't there long enough, but they did that on the course. Everything else on the course is things like standing there and falling backwards into the water, or, well, you know, jumping from one rock to another over a small ravine attached on a safety rope.
See, all the stuff you're saying is all the piss easy stuff.
Exactly.
Because it's not physical. Like
yeah,
for example,
for the people on the show, it is, because a lot of the people on the show are from CrossFit backgrounds and stuff like that. They've never had an opportunity to abseil. They've got a fear of heights. They've got all of these, so they're overcoming different things. And that's what that stuff's designed to do. It's of course designed for normal people to see how far you can push yourself. And I guess the reality is I'm not that normal in terms of all of the abseiling heights. I don't have any fears. You know, I've done bungee jumps and skydives, and I snowboard, and I've owned motorbikes, and I abseil and box. And I don't have fears over that stuff, that some things that people would be like, it'd be a monumental thing that they've achieved. No disrespect to those people, but for me, it's a daily life thing. The monumental achievement for me would have been having a bit about myself and staying there in the cold and the wet and the wind when I didn't want it. That would have proven something to me. But I think I was a little bit too fragile still at that time and not willing to make myself too uncomfortable.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's horses for courses. I mean, we had a chap when I passed out in my troop, had utter fear of heights. And when it come to doing the death slide, as we called it back then, they call it a zip line now or something, but, you know, oh my God, our training team, this is what I'm saying about these guys are good. You know, they got around him and like, you can do, and it, for someone like me, it was alien to have that fit. Like I couldn't understand. I mean, I could see that the guy was in fear. I could understand that bit. But to me, that's like one of the easiest bits of the course. All you got to do is hold on to this rope and
let gravity do its job.
Yeah, I mean that's just the start of the course. Then you've got the hard bit, you know, and the falling off backwards off the diving boards is just it's just one of them things. If the guy before you's done it, then you just step up and follow him, and it's not going to kill you, you know.
And if you follow instruction exactly, it doesn't go wrong.
It's the being cold, which, yeah, I get that, especially as you get older and you get more like hypothermic. And the extreme endurance is, you know, hanging in there when you're absolutely hanging out. That's the stuff that I think, when I think SAS, I think of them big yomps with the big backpacks on.
No sleep for 4 days, very little food, and they're still marching. Like, definitely.
Yeah.
See, for me, I guess my side of things is a very different arena. I've pushed myself in fires when it has been extremely hot, when things are going wrong. When
you don't have to explain yourself, Ricky. I mean, you've done more than most to get yourself on the show. If you wanted to leave, you're an adult. You can just leave, and to be honest, that's a quality in it. Is saying, "Nah, fuck this shit. I've had enough." It's not.
Well, that's exactly it. And I guess that was my point to my mates. You know, like when I got back to work, I'd had loser scribbled across my locker in pen, and you know, all banter, not in a horrible way. And you know, there was loads of banter, but I didn't mind that because I was like, do you know what? I was happy with my decision. And, you know, well, yeah, that's it. You know, if you're happy with your decision, you're happy with your decision. I wasn't there for anyone else. I was there for me.
Absolutely. Ricky, listen, on that note, we could chat forever, brother. It's been absolutely wonderful. I'm looking at a time of half an hour late for one of my rowing meetings. I'm rowing across the Atlantic in December, and my boys are there waiting, so and no, it's absolutely fine. I've just really enjoyed this chat, and I could just chat to you way more, even about SAS Who Dares Wins. There's so many questions like I'd want to ask you, but Ricky, stay on the line just so I can thank you properly when I push the record off. Friends at home, if you could like and subscribe, that'd be wonderful. I really hope you've got as much out of this conversation as I have. As always, folks, keep your comments respectful. Respect me, respect my guest, and respect the show. Otherwise, it's like, what? Are you a bit mental watching something you don't like? But Ricky, yeah, absolutely brilliant, brother. Stay on the line. Let's chat again, yeah?
Thanks for having me, mate.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome.
I've been living life right like I could just die.